Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can everybody hear and see?
Yes, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa salatu wa salam ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Alhamdulillah hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fi kama yuhibbu rabbuna wa yarda. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. Amma ba'd. Alhamdulillah. Thank you guys for joining us for another sisters class in our review of Sahih al-Bukhari. Alhamdulillah, we've arrived at our next chapter. Alhamdulillah. We are now at chapter number 5, Bab Man Hajara أو عمل خيرا لتزويج امرأة فله ما نوى. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, or he labels this chapter, Bab, the chapter of whoever, give me a second, the chapter of whoever migrated or did a good deed to take a woman's hand in marriage. The chapter, whoever migrates or does a good deed to take a woman's hand in marriage, then for him is what he intended, meaning his actions are based upon the intention. All right. And then Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, he brings a very famous hadith of Umar bin al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. That actions are based upon intention and everyone will be rewarded based upon their intentions. فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله. So whoever migrated from one place to another for Allah and His Messenger, for the sake of Allah and His Messenger, then his migration was for the sake of Allah and His Messenger. ومن كانت هجرته إلى الدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. And whoever makes hijrah to gain some share of the dunya, meaning you migrate from one place to another for work purposes or for school purposes, or to take some woman's hand in marriage, then your migration is for the reason that you migrated, meaning your reward will be contingent upon the intention that you had behind the action. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala mentions this chapter title to remind the believer of the importance of having the correct intention when engaging in any act of ibadah, when engaging in any act of good, whether it be migration, hijrah, whether it be salat, or whether it be marriage. Marriage is an act of ibadah. We're drawing our attention, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala is drawing our attention to the fact that marriage can be for personal reasons and it can be for religious reasons. All right, let's make that distinction here. Marriage can be for personal reasons and marriage can be for religious reasons. When does marriage become when is marriage for personal reasons? When does marriage fall into the category of I'm doing this for personal reasons, has nothing to do with religion? You guys can chime in whenever you want.
Could it be for like financial reasons? Would that be considered personal reasons?
Does anyone want to take a shot at that? How do you make the distinction between marriage becoming something that is done for religious reasons or marriage being done for personal reasons that has nothing to do with religion?
Can it be for your desires?
What do you mean? Elaborate.
Like your sexual desires?
To satisfy your sexual desires. Is that personal or is that religious?
I feel like it could be personal.
Wouldn't that be religious?
What?
No, because can't you fast?
They can be both. Very good. Someone mentioned in the chat, it can be both. So when does getting married, here again, goes back to my initial question, when does marriage fall into the category of it being done for personal reasons, has nothing to do with religion? And when does it fall into the category of being done for religious reasons, whereby there is a reward attached to it? When you get married because you want to be a part of, or you want to have some type of social status. Okay, very good. I'm so glad that you said that.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Would it also include either a brother or sister converting to Islam to marry the spouse that they're interested in? For that would be
okay. So don't jump the gun on that.
Okay.
I see what you're doing. Don't jump the gun on that, because that is coming. That chapter is coming. All right, and we'll get into that. But here again, let's go back to a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he brought in the scope of sadaqah, right? This hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that enjoining what is good and forbidding what is evil is considered a sadaqah. Al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahyu 'anil munkar sadaqah. He said to smile in the face of your brother or your sister in Islam is a sadaqah. He even said, وَفِي بِدْعِ أَحَدِكُمْ صَدَقَةً, and in the sexual fulfillment of your desires, there is a charity, meaning it is something that is rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even the Sahaba were amazed at this comment, because no one thinks that satisfying a person satisfying their sexual appetite, that is it could be rewarding religiously, that it could be meritorious religiously. And so the Sahaba, they asked the Prophet ﷺ that when a man goes to his wife satisfying his sexual desire, are you saying that he gets a reward for that? And the Prophet ﷺ said, yes. He said, don't you see that if he was to put his private in a place that is haram for him, then he would have a sin for that. He said, then likewise, if he places it in a place that is halal for him, meaning he is intimate with someone that it is legally permissible for him to be, to be intimate with, then he is rewarded for it. So guarding your chastity, if you are doing it, if you're getting married for the sake of preserving your chastity and protecting yourself from zina, from fornication and adultery, then it becomes religious. It becomes meritorious. So it's all based upon the intention. Now, if you're getting married because this is something that all of the women in your family are married, this is something that is a standard in your family, and your family will accept no boyfriends, no girlfriends, no live-in partners, nothing of that sort. Your family standard, the standard of your family is to get married, and you get married because you want to follow the standard of your family, then that's not necessarily for religious reasons. That is you following the protocol of your family, following in your parents' footsteps, following in your older siblings' footsteps. You understand what I'm saying? There's nothing religious about that. It's just you following a standard. You not wanting to be the oddball or the black sheep of the family by not getting married and not following the protocol that everybody else adheres to. So it's all about the intention behind it. So what is the intention? What is the proper intention when it comes to getting married? When you're going into a marriage religiously and you want the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is the intention that you should have upon entering that marriage so that you can get your reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So that that marriage now becomes an act of ibadah. What's the intention? What should the intention be?
You do it for the sake of Allah.
You're doing it for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you know that by me engaging in a marriage and me marrying this person and engaging in, a relationship with this person in a manner that was legislated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this is going to be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that marriage now becomes rewarding, becomes meritorious. Or when you get married because you say, I want to preserve my chastity, I want to safeguard myself. It falls into the category of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ that we just mentioned, that you putting your private part in a place that is halal, that is permissible for you, then you get a reward. So it's all based upon the intention behind it. All right. So marriage, much like any other engagement, human engagement, can become an act of worship depending upon the intention behind it. All right. So Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions the very famous hadith of Umar bin al-Khattab, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, having the intention of marriage for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, very good. Imam Bukhari mentions the hadith of Umar bin al-Khattab, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. This hadith is very important. Many of the scholars say that this hadith is like 1/3 of the knowledge of Islam. The same thing that Surah Al-Ikhlas is to the Quran is the same thing that this particular hadith is for Islam as a whole. 1/3 of the knowledge of Islam is contained in this hadith. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that actions are based upon intentions, because everything is contingent in Islam upon the individual's intention. There are many scholars that said that if I were to have a compilation of hadith, a book of hadith, I would make this hadith the first hadith in every book. Imam Bukhari actually mentions this hadith as the first hadith in his book. Imam Muslim mentions this as the second hadith in his book. Imam An-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, in the 40 hadith of Imam An-Nawawi, mentions this as the first hadith in his book. So you can see the scholars of hadith regard this hadith as one of the most important hadith in our religion. Very short, to the point, but it comprises of most of our religion. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, actions are based upon intentions. There were very few instances where, people took shahada for marriage. One of the hadith is the hadith of Muhajir Qais. The scholars in the explanation of this hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that actions are based upon intentions, some scholars say that the reason why the Prophet ﷺ made this comment, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that actions are based upon intentions, the reason why the Prophet ﷺ made this comment is because of an incident that happened during the time of the Sahaba, where they nicknamed this man Muhajir Qais. Muhajir Qais, the man who migrated for Qais. Some scholars say that this hadith is the reason why the Prophet made the statement, actions are based upon intention. Other scholars say that there are two totally separate instances. One has absolutely nothing to do with the other. Nonetheless, let's take a look at the hadith of Muhajir Qais. All right. This hadith was collected by Imam al-Tabarani on the authority of A'mash, who said that Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, كَانَ فِينَا رَجُلٌ خَطَبَ إِمْرَأَةٍ. That A'mash, he said that there was a man during, that Anas said that there was a man during the time of the Prophet ﷺ who proposed to a woman. He never mentioned the man's name, just said that there was a man who was, who proposed to a woman, Muslim man who proposed to a Muslim woman. يُقَالُ لَهَا Qais. Some say that her name was Qais. They say that her name was Qais. فَأَبَتْ أَن تَتَزَوَّجَهُ. And she refused to marry him. حَتَّى يُهَاجِرْ. Until he migrated. Perhaps this happened in Mecca. She migrated to Medina, and she told him that I will not marry you unless you migrate to Medina. You migrate to Medina, then I'll marry you. So she made her marriage conditional, that I'll marry you, but you have to migrate to Medina. Right? فَهَاجَرَ. So the man migrated. He migrated because he wanted to marry Qais. فَتَزَوَّجَهَا, and he married her once he migrated. He came through on his end, and so she fulfilled the other end, and that was to marry him. I'll marry you, but you have to migrate. And so he migrated and she married him. فَكُنَّا نُسَمِّيهِ مُهَاجِرْ Qais. So the Sahaba said, we used to call him the migrator for Qais, the man who migrated to marry Qais. That became his nickname amongst the Sahaba, the man who migrated for Qais. All right. And so the Prophet ﷺ said that whoever makes migration for Allah and his messenger, then his migration is for Allah and his messenger. And whoever migrates for some portion of the dunya or to take some woman's hand in marriage, then his migration is for that which he migrated for. All right, I'm going to come back to that hadith, but I want to go to the second incident that scholars mentioned that someone married someone else, right, based upon a condition that they made. All right. The second hadith was collected in the Sunan of Imam al-Nasa'i on the authority of Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhum, who said, Khataba Abu Talha Sulaym, that a man by the name of Abu Talha, who was a non-Muslim at the time, a man by the name of Abu Talha, who was a non-Muslim at the time, proposed to Sulaym. Sulaym was the mother of Anas ibn Malik. That was Anas's mother. All right, she was a new convert to Islam. Anas was a convert to Islam, and Anas's father never converted to Islam. He died as a disbeliever. So Anas, he's saying that Abu Talha, who was a disbeliever, proposed to his mother. And Sulaym, she refused to marry him. And she says to him, Wallahi ma mithluka ya Aba Talha yurad idha khataba imra'ah. She says to Abu Talha, I swear by Allah, Abu Talha, a man of your stature should never be refused when he asks for a woman's hand in marriage. She's acknowledging that, you know, even as a disbelieving man, you're a good man. I'm not knocking you. A man of your caliber should never be rejected when he asks for a woman's hand in marriage. Any woman would be honored to have you as a husband. She said, لَكِنَّكَ رَجُلٌ كَافِرٌ وَأَنَا امْرَأَةٌ مُؤْمِنَةٌ. She said, or Muslima, she said, but you are a disbeliever. You are a non-Muslim man, and I am a Muslim woman. وَلَا يَحِلُّ لِي أَنْ أَتَزَوَّجَكَ. And it is not permissible for me to be married to somebody like you. Meaning, in the religion of Islam, Islam prohibits a Muslim woman from being married to a non-Muslim man. All right? Islam prohibits. Does anyone know why? Does anyone know why? Is this like some type of oppression to Muslim women? Why Muslim women can marry only Muslim men, but Muslim men can marry women of the book, Christian and Jewish women? Is this some type of imbalance? Is this some type of injustice in the religion of Islam? Why?
It's not considered unjust because the man is supposed to be the leader, and if a Muslim woman marries a non-Muslim, then she's supposed to follow his lead. And if he doesn't believe in Islam, then you know, it would be a conflict for the woman.
Okay. Anybody else?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
So I think that the woman cannot marry a non-Muslim male because he can lead her outside of the fold of Islam, but he's permitted to marry a Christian or non-Muslim woman because he's the leader of his home and he can influence her to take her shahada.
Very good. Very good, Sister Sharika. So the same reason that the Muslim woman is not allowed to marry anybody but a Muslim man is the same exact reason that a Muslim man is permitted to marry a woman who is not Muslim, provided that she's from the woman of the book, either Jewish or Christian, of the Jewish faith and Christian faith. The same reason. The same reason Muslim woman is not allowed to marry a non-Muslim man is the same exact reason that the Muslim man is allowed to marry a woman from the book, as because the man usually has the most influence. he usually has the most influence over a woman. Women are very impressionable, especially when they are at the beginning stages of a relationship. They will change their entire life. They'll change their hairstyle. They'll change the type of car they drive. They will change just about everything. I don't know about now. I don't know about today's time, because women have, our society has changed and the values have changed and shifted. So women operate a little differently today than they did maybe, let's say, 20, 30 years ago, right? But a woman will change, pretty much everything about herself. If you guys remember, I think I think the movie was Soul Food. I think the movie was Soul Food, right? And you remember they were all of the sisters, and then there was one of the younger sister, and they asked her at the dinner table, how many times did she change her major in college, right? You guys remember that scene? And the grandmother, I think, said, or the mom said, every time she's in a relationship with a man, whatever he's taking up in college, she changes her major to whatever that man is doing in college. Do you guys remember that? I'm not sure if it was Soul Food or not. You guys remember that scene? They're sitting at the table, and I think it was Lauren London who was playing the part. She was like the younger sister. And it was like, she changes her major based upon whoever, right, this Christmas, you're right. She said she changes her major based upon whoever she's in a relationship with. You guys follow me? Women are impressionable. Whoever that she's in a relationship with, whatever his major is in college, that's what she changes her major to. She done changed her major multiple times because she's been in multiple different relationships. That's part of the reason why a Muslim woman is not allowed to marry other than a Muslim man, because of the influence. And so if a non-Muslim man comes into a Muslim woman's life, there's a strong possibility that his influence is going to be overpowering and may lead her outside of Islam. Or at very least, if there's children ever to come in between them, then those children will be influenced by their father. The children will take the father's last name. The children will be heavily influenced by the father, and perhaps they will be stripped of the opportunity to even become Muslim. Right. Right. It's just natural as a woman to be a nurturer, to be, you want to please your man. And sometimes there are no boundaries. And this is why it's important for a woman to have a wali in the early engagement period of the marriage process, because sometimes women forget about the boundaries. The emotional engagement overshadows the logic. The emotional engagement overshadows the logic, whereas the wali, the man, his only investment in the situation is to see his daughter, his niece, his granddaughter, whoever she is, get married. That's his only investment. So he's not emotionally invested in that. So his logic remains intact. So when he sees red flags, when he sees something that might be problematic or a conflict of interest, he can readily spot it. He can spot it immediately. And he can call the man on it. Whereas a woman, here again, she gets emotionally invested and logic goes out the window. I'm not saying all women, and I'm not saying all the time, but in most situations, yes. This is why the wali is an important factor at the beginning stages of the courting process, because the man is always going to rely on his logic. He's always going to rely on his logic. We're left-brainers. That's how we function, right? We're problem solvers. We use logic for most of our engagements. Whereas women, you use a little bit of logic, but sometimes your emotions overcompensate and oversaturate. And so therefore you find yourself, jammed up. So the same reason that a Muslim man is allowed to marry a non-Muslim woman, provided she is from the women of the book, is the same exact reason that a Muslim woman is not allowed to marry anyone except a Muslim man. So Abu Talha, he proposes to Sulaym. I want to marry you. He's a non-Muslim man. He sees virtue in this Muslim woman. I want to marry you. I'm interested in you. And Sulaim says to him, very respectfully, a man of your caliber should never be rejected when he asks for a woman's hand in marriage. But we have one problem here, and that is that you're a disbelieving man and I'm a believing woman, and it's not permissible for me in my religion to marry someone like you. She said, however, if you take your shahada, this is the point of reference here. If you take your shahada and become a Muslim, then I'll make your shahada my dowry. I'll make your shahada my dowry, and I won't ask you for anything else. I'll make your shahada my dowry. And so Abu Talha, he converts to Islam and they get married. And so Sulaim, she tried to capture the best of both worlds, right? And that was, she wanted to marry him, but she also wanted him to convert to Islam. So she used herself as the bait for that. Very smart woman. She used herself as the bait. She knew that he wanted to be with her, and she knew that depending on how bad he wanted to be with her, he would be willing, or he would be receptive, to the dawah that she was giving him. And so she got the best of both worlds. She got a man to convert to Islam, and she gained him as a husband. All right, she gained him as a husband. And as the Prophet ﷺ says, that if one person converts to Islam by your hands, it is better for you than everything that the sun has risen over. If one person converts to Islam at your hands, then it is better for you. مِمَّا طَلَعَ عَلَيْهِ الشَّمْسِ مِمَّا طَلَعَتْ عَلَيْهِ الشَّمْسِ. It is better for you than anything that the sun has risen over. However, the point here is that, did Abu Talha take shahada because he really wanted to be Muslim? Or did he take shahada, here again, to take this woman's hand in marriage? What is the determining factor? Someone want to answer that? How do you determine whether or not someone took shahada to be with you as a spouse in marriage, or someone took shahada because they really wanted to be Muslim, and gaining you as a spouse was just like the cherry on top?
In my experience, it's been what they do after the fact, after they've taken the shahada and married you. What do they do after that?
Very good, Yusuf. Very good, mashallah, tabarakallah. And that's exactly what the scholars say, how you can determine whether or not the shahada was sincere or not. If someone takes shahada or does anything, any good deed for the sake of marriage, the scholars say that the sincerity of the individual is oftentimes determined by what they do with Islam after they've gotten you. After they've gained you as the spouse, they got what they wanted. What do they do afterwards with their shahada? There were many people who embraced Islam at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but because he was extremely generous, he used to give away charity. Arabs would come and say to other tribes, go see Muhammad, for indeed he gives away charity like a man that doesn't fear poverty. And they would come and they would take shahada just because the Prophet ﷺ was being generous. I mean, Christians have been doing this for generations. They go to different parts of the world. They feed people. They feed the homeless. They prey on the vulnerable and the weak, right? The hungry, the poor, the needy. They give them food packages, and then they give them a Bible. They've been doing this. They've been doing this for centuries. For thousands and thousands of years, they've been doing this, converting people to Christianity, either through the sword, as they accuse Islam of, converting people to Christianity through the sword, through force, or converting them through coercion, coercion through, giving them food packages, giving loans out to countries in exchange for allowing Christian, ministries and things like that to operate in their countries, indoctrinating their people. Yes, absolutely. They've been doing this for centuries. Whereas in Islam, you can't really be a Muslim unless you convert to Islam by your own free will. Nobody can force you or coerce you or, indoctrinate you to become a Muslim. You have to convert. Every individual's conversion is contingent upon their sincerity. Nobody can force you to be a Muslim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, La ikraha fi din. قَدْ تَبَيَّنَ الرُّشْدُ مِنَ الْغَيِّ, that there is no compulsion in the religion. Nobody can force you to be a Muslim. You have to do that by your own free will, right? And so during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were many people who converted to Islam because he was extremely generous. And then later on, they were drawn to Islam through, through their sincerity. However, so once they embraced Islam and they became good Muslims, their sincerity was apparent. And so in the case of Abu Talha, he clearly took his shahada seeking or desiring Islam. How do we know? Because look at the person he became after he took his shahada and married Sulaym. Look at who he became. He became one of the great companions of the Prophet ﷺ. That is the telltale sign that his conversion was sincere. Gaining Sulaym as a spouse was just the cherry on top. So going back to what Yusuf said, how do you determine whether or not the person took shahada sincerely or had some ulterior motive? It was based upon what they did afterwards. Based upon what they did after. So in the case of Muhajir Qais, he clearly migrated, to marry the woman. So although he made hijrah as an act of ibadah, he didn't do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He migrated to take this woman's hand in marriage. So his action was not necessarily haram. It's not necessarily haram for him to migrate to marry this woman, nor does it make his marriage invalid. But he doesn't get the reward of hijrah. He doesn't get the reward of migration. You follow me? He only gets the woman that he was seeking in marriage, and that's it. So if he marries for migration and marries and he migrates for migration and gets marriage on top of that, then he can combine two intentions. So a person can take shahada and a person can take shahada to marry a person. But the shahada has to be sincere for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is important for us in today's time because there are a lot of women and in some cases some men who take shahada today to marry a Muslim. This is something that is very prevalent in the Muslim community today. There are many Muslims that are listening right now, possibly listening right now, and there are many Muslims, women out there that I know that are Muslims right now today because they started off in a relationship with a Muslim man. Whether that was halal or haram is neither here nor there. They were in a relationship with a Muslim man. They saw some things in that Muslim man, or maybe he was giving her dawah, and they converted to Islam. They married him or maybe separated from him after they took shahada. Nonetheless, they remained Muslims. They remain Muslims. Still Muslim to this day, even though they are not in a relationship with the man who introduced them to Islam. That is a telltale sign that they were sincere when they took their shahada. And there are many women who converted to Islam to be with a man, and soon as that marriage or that relationship dissolved and was over, they left Islam. They left Islam. And that's a telltale sign that their shahada was not sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their shahada was contingent upon their relationship with that particular man. And that's very dangerous. Very dangerous. And the reason why this isn't dangerous, because if there were children involved in that situation, then after apostating, the children are supposed to go to the Muslim parent. But we know in our society, it doesn't usually work out like that. So if a non-Muslim woman converts to Islam, she marries a Muslim man, they have 2, 3, 4 children between them. She decides to apostate, they separate or they divorce, she apostates from Islam. Those children are automatically supposed to go to their father, provided that he's a practicing Muslim. Those children are automatically supposed to go to the father. The apostate doesn't get custody of the children. But in our society, the woman, the court usually favors the woman, so she can go to court, file for custody, full custody, get full custody of those children, indoctrinate those children so much so that they end up hating their father, who is a Muslim, because she apostated from Islam. So she naturally has a hatred, a resentment towards the man. And so she teaches her children to hate him and hate Islam on top of it. That's usually what happens. And this creates a mass confusion in the minds of those children. And it was a lack of sincerity, usually on both parts. Where was the lack of sincerity on both parts? Where was the lack of sincerity on both parts?
When the woman who apostated didn't stay in Islam because they left the marriage or relationship.
Okay. And where was the lack of sincerity on the part of the man?
If you're saying if the man is still a Muslim, where's the insincere? I mean, where's the sincerity?
Where's the lack of, I said that the children are in a state of mass confusion as a result of the lack of sincerity on the part of both parents. Hers, she apostated from Islam, meaning she converted to Islam to be with him. However, when their marriage was dissolved, she dissolved Islam as well, showing you that there was no sincerity to Islam. But where was his sincerity and lack of sincerity in all of that?
Probably the lack of practicing Islam or showing the children about Islam.
Or giving her dawah, making her believe that her Islam was contingent upon him. He has to separate himself from her shahada and explaining to her that it doesn't matter whether or not we stay together or not. You're taking shahada for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for me. I am just the cherry on top if you consider it that. But you are not taking your shahada for me. And he has to make that very clear. But if he doesn't, if he's leading her on, leading her to believe, take shahada and we're going to get married, and she believes that her shahada is contingent upon their relationship, then he's at fault with that as well, because he never removed himself from the scenario. That her shahada was her relationship between her and God, right? Between her and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right. So that is a lack of sincerity on both parts. So it's very important for men, who are in relationships with women who are non-Muslim, and that are, giving them da'wah. They have to make sure that they make them understand that if you take shahada, that's for you, not for me. Your shahada is not going to stop me from leaving you. Your shahada is not going to stop me. So someone says not choosing a Muslim woman. Well, I mean, the thing is while it would probably be more suitable for a Muslim man to choose a Muslim woman, but I want you guys to take a deep think about this for a moment. We need to get serious about this conversation, because I oftentimes hear Muslim women say, these Muslim men are out here marrying these non-Muslim women or being in relationships with these non-Muslim women. And they say that, number one, as if it is something that is haram. They say as if that is haram. I'm not talking about the type of women these men get into relationships with, but Islam does permit a Muslim man to marry a woman who is from the women of the book, either a Jewish faith or Christian faith. Should she be practicing? Yes, that is the more suitable situation, right? The more favorable situation, the more honorable situation. However, what I want you to consider is, given a lot of what is transpiring in the Muslim community today. Now, when I'm talking about is looking at the age demographics. You look at the age demographics between, I would say, let's say between 22 to about 32, 22 to 32. And you look at the that age demographic and you look at the amount of practicing Muslim women within that age demographic, very few. Very few. And I say that literally. I just had this conversation with my son, who's 22, just had this conversation with him the other day. And I said, I really feel sorry for you. I do, because raising you, I never thought that you would get to this particular age and struggle to find a practicing Muslim woman. I mean, you find many Muslim women in that age demographic that don't even wear hijab at all. And for some Muslim men, hijab is a standard for them. I look at my children, no matter, and my children are by far, my adult children are not by far not perfect, but they have a standard. They have an idea of what a proper Muslim woman looks like in their view, starting with their mother, starting with their stepmom, starting with other women, their grandmothers, the other women that are in their lives. They've seen these women wearing hijab their entire life. They've seen these women, not using profanity, not talking to their husbands crazy. They've seen this throughout their entire lives. So that becomes a standard in their mind. So they say to themselves, if I were ever to marry a Muslim woman, this is the standard that she would have to meet, in order. And so when they're looking out into the pool of practicing Muslim women within that particular age demographic, it's almost non-existent. Let's start with the hijab. And then after we get past the hijab, then we go to, because the hijab is the most apparent, all right? That's not the hijab is not the end all be all, but for men, we're visual creatures. For men, we're visual creatures. And the most visual sign of a practicing Muslim woman is the observance of hijab, is it not? That's the starting place. I'm not saying that's the end all be all, because she could wear hijab and not pray. There are many women who observe the hijab and they don't make salah. There are many women who observe the hijab culturally, but they don't have the adab of Islam spiritually, religiously. So I'm not saying that the hijab is the end all be all, but we are visual creatures. So if you say to yourself as a man, if I say to myself as a man, I want to marry a woman who observes hijab all the time, that eliminates a large percentage of the Muslim women that are out there within that age demographic. I'll get to the 32 to 40. I'm talking about between the ages of 22 and 32. I would say, if I'm not exaggerating, I would say 85 to probably 87 of the girls, Muslim women within that age demographic, do not observe hijab on a daily basis religiously. They don't. They don't. And that's the starting place. Let's just start with hijab. Then after hijab, let's talk about observing the salah 5 times a day and incorporating the salah as a part of your daily regimen, fasting the month of Ramadan and the other acts of ibadah. That eliminates, many more. Then after we get to that part, let's go to the next level and let's talk about the Islamic adab, being respectful to men, being respectful to your father, being respectful to your husband. A lot of, especially Muslim men who grew up in a home with a father and a mother and have never seen their mother disrespect their father, have never encountered that. They don't even have a concept of a woman disrespecting her husband. They don't have a concept of that, except what they see out in the world. But their immediate environment where they were raised, their bi'ah, they don't have a concept of that because they've never seen their mother disrespect their father. They've never seen their mother belittle their father. They've always seen dad as a stand-up guy and an honorable guy in the home, and the mom is respectful of that. That's pretty much what they've seen 99.9% of the time that they were being raised. So here again, that becomes a standard. And then when you look at that particular age demographic, there is no concept of respect, especially not respect for a man. No concept of respect for a man whatsoever. So that eliminates. So how much is left? And then, of course, that small percentage that is left, where in the world are they going to find them? Where in the world are they going to find them? And we're not even talking about, let's go to another level. So we talked about the hijab. We talked about, the religious rituals, the observance of religious rituals. We talked about the third level of adab, Islamic manners and, Islamic practices. And let's go even a step further and talk about preservation of chastity. How many Muslim women within that particular age demographic are virgins? We don't even want to have that conversation. How many, and furthermore, even with the boys, how many Muslim women within that age demographic don't already have children? A child or two. So that eliminates, because there are a lot of Muslim boys that are born and raised Muslim that don't want to marry a woman that already has a family, that already started a family. So, so now it puts our young boys in a situation where they start to think, okay, all of these boxes that I have open, Sister Halima, I'm coming to you. All of these boxes that I have open, I've only checked maybe 1 or 2. I got 10 boxes open when it comes to what I'm looking for in a wife from the Muslim women. I've checked maybe 1 or 2 boxes. I can't really find those other boxes. So now they start to look within the non-Muslim community. These are women that they see on a daily basis, women they went to school with, women they work around, women, that may have shown an interest in them, because of the way that they carry themselves as Muslims. And so they start to entertain that. I'm not justifying that. I'm just stating the facts. I'm just telling you like it is. I'm just telling you like it is. My 16-year-old said to me the other day, he said, Abby, wallahi, in school, the Muslim girls in school are worse than the non-Muslim girls. He said, the Muslim girls, Abby, in school are worse than the non-Muslim girls. He said, you'll find the non-Muslim girls with like good adab, good manners, some of them. He said, but the Muslim girls, like, they just rowdy and loud and disrespectful and, arrogant. It's just like, so, I mean, it's starting at a young age. We're talking about Ramadan comes around and then all of the same girls that had boyfriends that's cursing in the hallway, using profanity, fighting and all of that stuff. Then Ramadan comes around and they put on hijab. The Muslim boys are sitting there looking like, wait a minute, because it's Ramadan, you putting on your hijab? Like, it's absurd. It's insane. It's insane the way that we gravitate towards Islam. Just yesterday, you were smoking hookah, you were smoking vapes in the bathroom, and you were fighting with girls, and you were cursing in the hallway, and wearing tight clothes. And now today is the first day of Ramadan, and you put on your hijab. And then soon as Ramadan is over, it's right back to who and what you were before. Yikes! Yeah. And so the Muslim boys, especially those who have fathers at home, they're up. My sons are up every morning for Salatul Fajr. Every morning. I don't know what they do when they're not around me, but when they are around me, you're up for Salat, you're praying, you're engaging. You understand? I can't say the same for a girl who doesn't wear hijab all year long and then Ramadan comes around and then she puts the hijab on. So here again, I'm not saying that this is right or or justifying it. I'm just stating the facts that this is what we see. Go ahead, Sister Halima. I'm sorry.
Assalamu alaikum. I get what you're saying. As a parent of a boy, I get it. But as parents, we got to be on our boys to know what they're looking for. Because like you eliminated, then they don't want the girls that are not no hijab, their mannerism, this, that, and the other. But a non-Muslim is not the alternative. That's not giving them what they're not looking for. You know what I mean? That's exactly what you're saying. You don't want a Muslim woman, but the non-Muslim you'll almost settle for the things that she does. And I'm not even talking about just the young girls. I'm talking about grown men that still settle for these non-Muslim women. I literally just had this discussion with my husband. Men are allowed to marry women of the book, not non-Muslim women. There's a difference.
Absolutely.
Half the time, they don't even have any religion. So that's forbidden for you, bro.
I agree. I agree. And the age demographic that you are referring to are is the older group. So we're talking about now between like the 35 to like 50 group. All right. And
absolutely, there's a brother that literally my husband like tries to defend the brothers, and I go hard, at least between us. Like the brother don't know I feel this way about him, but my husband knows how I feel about certain people.
Right.
And we saw the wedding, we saw the reception. We never saw an Islamic marriage, but you sitting there defending the fact that he married a woman of the book. You know what I mean?
SubhanAllah. SubhanAllah. Yeah. Yeah. So that age demographic, they're looking for convenience. So we're talking about the 35 to about 50 that go after the non-Muslim women. They are looking for convenience. And what do I mean by that? They don't want the complications. They see it as complications. They see it as hurdles because they don't honor these symbols that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, these code of ethics that Allah has given us in our deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, ذَلِكَ وَمَن يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. That for those who honor the symbols of Allah, the code that Allah has given us in our deen, then this is from the piety in the hearts. They don't honor that. They don't honor the wali. They don't honor not being alone with the woman. They don't honor, you know what I mean, like going to the masjid and doing it in public. They don't honor. These are all code of ethics that have been given to us in our deen. They don't honor that. So they go after non-Muslim women for convenience, that I can circumvent all of the ethics that Islam gives us if I just pursue this non-Muslim one. Here again, keyword non-Muslim woman, not Christian, not Jewish, not proclaiming Christian faith, not proclaiming Jewish faith, Christian faith, non-Muslim. I'm just not Muslim. Just because you're not Muslim doesn't automatically mean you're a Christian. Non-Muslim does not equate to Christian, and definitely not Jewish. Non-Muslim just means non-Muslim. And a non-Muslim can be also someone who's just non-faithful, doesn't have any faith at all, right? Doesn't have any faith at all. And these men, they go after these women for the convenience. I don't have to give her a dowry. There doesn't have to be a courting process. I don't have to observe, protect my chastity. I don't have to have a wali. I don't even have to do it in the masjid. I don't have to explain to anybody what I'm doing. I don't owe any accountability to the Muslim community. You understand? That's convenience. You circumvented all of those protocols that Islam put in place. You've circumvented all of that by going after this woman. So now you can pursue this, right, without the complications, without the hurdles, without the protocols, without ticking all of the boxes that Islam put in place. Even as far as giving that woman her rights that Islam demands that you give her, marrying her. What's the issue with not marrying inside the masjid? The issue is the disregard for Islamic traditions. That's the point. That's the point. Getting married inside the masjid is honoring the tradition of Islam, sitting in front of an imam, the family's there, her family there, your family there, non-Muslim family members that are there observing it being done in the masjid after Salatul Maghrib, after Salatul Asr, after Jumu'ah. We just had a marriage at the masjid like two Jumu'ahs ago, after Jumu'ah. The whole community stayed behind to see the marriage, to say the nikah. You can do your reception wherever you want to do it, but let the officiation of the marriage, let that be done traditionally like it's supposed to be done in the masjid with the imam, with the wali, with the contract, with the dowry. Let the Muslims observe that. The Prophet ﷺ said, "I'linu an-nikah Publicize your marriage. Do it in the masjid so the Muslim community can observe it. I have been taking my children to marriages at the masjid since they were babies. That's all they know. We go into the masjid because so-and-so is getting married. We go into the masjid because so-and-so is getting married. What do you mean non-Muslim Muslim family members that don't want to come in the masjid?
Like my parents.
When I got,
I'm the only Muslim.
uh-huh.
My parents, all of my family. I'm the only one, and I don't really. They wouldn't. Well, I'll just leave it at that.
So you don't think that if you were getting married, one of the happiest days in your life, that your non-Muslim relatives wouldn't mind putting themselves at an inconvenience for just a few moments to see you married off? They wouldn't
A
want
few have expressed already not wanting to.
My non-Muslim family members were
way.
at the masjid. My non-Muslim family members were at the masjid. Absolutely. The day I got married.
It's for the silliest reasons, like not wanting to cover your head, not wanting to take your shoes off.
They don't have to cover their hair. They don't have to cover their hair. I mean, they're not coming in the masjid with a short skirt on showing their thighs and their cleavage. No, there should be, I mean, the same way, well, I can't say the same way you would show up at church because they do show up at church like that. But observing, the tradition of modesty, they don't have to cover their hair. They don't have to put on an abaya or whatever to come inside the masjid. Just observe the tradition of modesty, which is a part of their faith as well.
Okay, good.
It's a universal tradition. Modesty is a universal tradition. But when I got married, my non-Muslim family members came to the masjid. When I had my aqiqah, when I slaughtered for my son that was born, my non-Muslim family members came. My non-Muslim family members know where the masjid is. They know Muslims. I mean, everybody's situation is a little different. If you're from like the Essex County area, you don't went to high school with people that are Muslim. You don't went to jail people that are Muslim. So everybody pretty much know everybody. So it's a small knit. It's a big but small knit community. But my family members have never, my non-Muslim family members have never been, adverse to come into the masjid for any event that went on. Yeah, go ahead. You have a question. You said you have a question. You can.
Okay. Can you hear me? I'm not for sure.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Okay. So
you just muted yourself. Unmute the mic.
Okay. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So, just listening to this class today, I understand where you're coming from, but I think for most sisters, I want to speak on the reality when it comes to marriage, right? I think if you ask majority of sisters if they want to get married, they will say yes, even if they're divorcees, widows, or whatever the case may be. They may have a desire for it. But the reality is that when it comes to the sisters, it's not a lot of options like the brothers can have, because they can marry non-Muslim women, they can marry, Muslim women. So they have a bigger, like a bigger option to choose from, whereas we don't, right? And then I think from the circle of people that I'm within, or what I have seen on social media, we kind of complain about the same thing. We have to worry about getting married and not getting provided for correctly, or dealing with some type of major haram. And I want to name those, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
This is us talking.
Okay, so major harams, I'm gonna speak for myself, that I will not deal with. I'm not dealing with abuse. I'm not dealing with cheating because I accept polygamy. So if I accept polygamy, I can't deal with the struggle of cheating. That's a no-no for me. That's a big, I'm going to divorce you. So what we're dealing with, or what I have known, including myself and also other sisters deal with, is brothers that cheat, they don't provide correctly, and they even may have they may be addicted to porn. And these are the things that we keep inside the household. that may not even be said out loud, maybe said within a small circle, because if you take these type of things maybe to like the imam, it may be an embarrassment to the brothers. I'm more than sure there are a lot of sisters that hold secrets, dark secrets that they know about their husband, their Muslim husbands, because whatever a Kafir man do, it's like that's expected from them. It's just like a Kafir woman. If she's doing X, Y, and Z, that's expected. So you have sisters that's really real and don't want to deal with a brother that's out here drinking and smoking and clubbing, because if that's the case, you could deal with a Kafir man and go through all that. Like, that's the way I see things. So you have women now that literally are choosing to be single and is okay with being single because that's more peaceful than being with a man that's probably gonna lie, cheat, or be on you. Because to be honest, that is the majority. The majority of the Muslim men are just like the Kafir man. That is the biggest complaint.
I wouldn't say the majority, but here again, it's based upon the leadership in the community that these men come from. And I don't necessarily fault the men as much as I fault the leadership in the community, because the imam and the community kind of set the standards for what type of behavior will be tolerated and allowed. That type of behavior from men is usually from either, number one, anomalies, meaning these are 1 out of maybe 50 men in the community that do that, not the majority. Or 2, men that come from communities or don't actually belong to a particular community. They don't belong, they float, they go from this masjid to that masjid. They don't necessarily belong to any particular community. So it goes back to that. I'm talking about the root of the problem. All right, as it relates to problems that men come into the relationship with, like looking at porn, or verbally abusive, mentally abusive, that's on a case-by-case basis. That's not something that we can eradicate, or eliminate from the community. I mean, watching porn is something that has become prevalent in society. I mean, everywhere you go, that's just what it is. Now, if you meet a brother and that's his struggle, then perhaps you can, help him get through that. And when you see that he's not trying to improve in that area, then you can kind of say, all right, well, this is where I kind of draw the line with that. I see that you have an addiction to this. And having an addiction to porn is different than somebody who watches porn recreationally. Keep in mind, it's an addiction. It's probably something that he has been doing for a long time and never had the encouragement to stop, never had an incentive to stop. So you marry a brother and that's his struggle. It could have been porn, it could have been drugs, it could have been anything else. I mean, we don't come perfect. We don't come perfect. You got to pick and choose, what you are. And I mean, he's not going to tell you during the sit down process that that's his struggle, right? It's an embarrassment. It's a weakness. All right. But then later on, after you marry him, it kind of exposes itself. It exposes itself. Just like you as a woman might have struggles, things that you're struggling with. You might still be communicating with the father of your child. That's a lot of complaints that I hear with a lot of brothers. She's still, her and the baby father like best friends, and they communicating with one another. It's a problem for him. He keeps telling the woman, listen, I'm not comfortable with you. Well, I have kids with him and we knew each other since high school and I'm not going to stop just communicating with him. It could go both ways. We don't come perfect. So you have to pick and choose the things that you're willing to tolerate and the things that you're willing to deal with and the things that you're not. And you make those things clear at the beginning of the sit down. You make those things clear at the courting process. So once you observe those things happening in the marriage, then you've already justified your exit. You've already said, like, listen, I already told you at the beginning that I wasn't going to tolerate that. I see that this is a problem with you, and I'm putting in a request to terminate this marriage because I can't handle that. This is a bit much for me. Go ahead, Jade.
So in regards to that, like when it comes to some of the grievances that we may experience, like maybe even early on in our marriage, what part of that is it part of the wali's responsibility too, to kind of maybe intervene, like when we see certain things happen, either between, whether it's an issue on the wife or the husband, like early on, to try to, I guess, help resolve that issue? Or do we just deal with that within the confines of our own marriage? Like, is there a certain, I guess, gauge to where we can involve the wali to help salvage the marriage?
Well, you're only gonna, I think first and foremost, you should try to rectify those things within the confines of your relationship. Because once you open the door to welcome outside influence, that can go one or two ways. Like, and you usually don't have any control once you've opened that door to allow outside entities to influence your marriage. You don't usually have any control over what direction that is going to go. All right, so it's very, very important that you try to reconcile whatever differences you have or whatever issues you have between yourselves first. All right. If you see that your wali, whether that is your father, your uncle, whoever's, taking that particular position in your life, if you see that he is balanced enough and is fair enough and just enough, to come in and try to help bring he's not inclining towards you because you're his daughter, and he's not inclining towards him because he's sympathetic for him, being a man. But he's trying to exercise fairness between you because he just wants to see the best for both of you. That is the type of person that you kind of slowly include into your situation. But when you know that you have a family member, be it a brother, be it a father, be it an uncle, and you know that he is biased towards you, then that's probably not the type of person you want to invite into your situation, because he's not going to be fair. He's not coming in to be fair. He's coming in thinking that he's being fair to you, but in doing so, he's going to be unfair to the other person. So you need somebody, who is impartial, and fair, and seeking fairness and justice in the situation. If you can find somebody like that, then absolutely you include them in, because sometimes two people,
It would come back to like the intention as well for all three parties. It would come back to the intention to keep the marriage, solidified.
Right. And that's the goal, which is why when a woman goes to an imam to complain or whatever the case may be, the first thing she leads with is, I love my husband. Don't get it twisted. I love my husband. I love my marriage, but these are the issues that I'm having that I need help with. And that makes it very clear so that the imam knows, because even me as a counselor, sometimes I always ask, okay, so tell me what the issue is first, because I want to know where you are, so I can understand where you want this situation to go. Do you want out? I don't want to encourage you to, just let the chips fall where they may and move on with your life when that's not really what you want. So you have to set the tone when you invite the person in. Make no mistake about it. I love my husband. I love my marriage, but these are the issues that I need help with. So you made it very clear that I don't want a divorce. I don't want out of my marriage. I want help. But sometimes, women don't understand that, and they lead with this misleading. They give a false positive. So then because men, is our natural job to come in and be Superman. We want to come in and we want to save the day. Imams, students of knowledge included. You come off and you say, my husband is doing this, he's doing that, and he's this, haram. So now we feel like, all right, I got to come in and I got to put this man in his place, when that's not really what you wanted. So it's up to the woman to set the tone as it relates to how she wants the wali to intervene, right? But, you have to understand that, we all come into relationships with, our own hangups, and nobody's going to come in perfect, and you have to pick and choose the stuff there are some non-negotiables. There are things that I don't think any woman should tolerate. Cheating is one of them. All right, but there's some women who have tolerated cheating. There's some women who have tolerated that. I can't tell you what to tolerate. I can say that this is haram, and Islam says, but there are some women who know that their husband have cheated, and they're willing to be patient with that if, in fact, he's willing to correct the behavior, reconcile that behavior. So I can't say around the board that all of the grievances that the sister mentioned is something that all women agree with. no woman wants to be cheated on, but not all women who have been cheated on want to be left in that relation, want to leave that relationship. It's on a case-by-case basis, but you have to pick and choose. And I get it, these men are not the most perfect men, but you can't blame the men. You have to blame the society, and you have to blame the Islamic community, the Muslim community at large, because it didn't used to be like this. I remember a time when Muslim men, there was some honor about them. And some of you who have been around long enough can remember that time. I remember a time when it wasn't like this. This free for all, every Muslim man just kind of doing him. There's no, there's no accountability to his behavior. No, I remember a time when an imam would send a group of brothers to a brother's house and whoop his behind. In Masjid Ahl Sunnah in East Orange, New Jersey, there was a particular place in the basement where they used to take brothers in the basement and whoop they behind in the basement. Facts. If you know, you know. And that struck fear in a lot of brothers. That struck fear in a lot of brothers. And so if they got married, they either got married in the masjid or they went somewhere far away and got married because they didn't want anything to do with, they didn't want any accountability. Yeah, some of you new shahadas, you don't know. This used to go down. They used to take the brother to the basement and whoop his behind in the basement. Absolutely. And all the brothers in the community knew that, if this particular brother showed up at your door or met you in the masjid, you knew exactly what time it was. You knew exactly what time it was. And so all of that has stopped. And so as a result of that, there's that type of leadership in the Muslim community doesn't really exist anymore. And as a result of that, brothers have run amok because without law, there's no order. Without law, there's no order. Yeah. So whoever makes migration or does an act of good to take some woman's hand in marriage, then his action, his reward is based upon the intention. So when we're talking about having the correct intention for getting married, it should be to preserve your chastity. It should be to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it should be to observe the rights that the person in the relationship has over you. That is the intention for getting married. To observe the rights that the person has over you. Not seeking your rights over the person, but to make sure that I'm fulfilling the rights that the person has over me. That is the intention in marriage. So inshallah ta'ala, next week we'll cover the very next chapter, which is Bab Tazweej and Mu'sir alladhi ma'ahu al-Quran, the chapter of marrying the person who doesn't have the financial means to get married. This is one of my personal favorites because it adds a lot of context. We talked about at the beginning in the first chapter about the person who has the ability to get married. Now let's talk about the person who doesn't have the ability to get married and how Islam still encourages that person to get married, even though he doesn't have the financial means to do so. And how the Prophet ﷺ reconciled that issue that some of the Sahaba were poor and they still needed to get married. And how did he, as a leader, solve this problem? Because that's the leader's responsibility. His part of being a good leader is being solution oriented. You realize you have a problem, and so you offer the solution. Our problem as African-American Muslims is that the solution is in Islam, but we don't want that solution. We don't want that solution. When I did the discussion on nikah al-misyar, the marriage of convenience, you should have seen the comments. Man, I ain't doing no marriage like that, and blah, 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 blah. It's just like, I don't get it. I don't understand you. I really don't get it. This is for your benefit. For your benefit, for you to arrange your marital situation in the best way that you see fit for yourself. It doesn't have to be cut and dry. Doesn't have to be, it's not a cookie cut system. It's based upon an individual circumstance and situation. There are laws and rules, but some of those things can be, some of those things can be circumvented depending on the need and, the want and the desire of the two people that are involved. And Islam gives us that leeway, gives us that space to do that. And you still have people saying, nope, it got to be like this. And if it's not like this, then I'm just going to remain single. It's just like, well, suit yourself if that's what you want. The leader's job is to provide solutions to a problem. And that's what Islam does. Islam is the solution to human beings' problems, mankind's problems. Allah sent this book down as a shifa, as a healing for the problems that we're suffering from. But we don't want to take the medicine. We don't want to take the medicine. The same behavior as Bani Israel. Allah says, every time a prophet and messenger comes to you with something that you desire not, you reject them, or some of them you kill. And here we are. So I don't know if there were any comments or questions about what was presented, inshallah ta'ala. Were there any comments, questions? Got a couple minutes before my group.
No questions, just comments. I really appreciate this class. It gives a lot of details that you wouldn't see in the Quran or other places. So I enjoy learning something new to get a better understanding.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. And I enjoy teaching. As I said before, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. The teacher is only as good as the student. So when students show interest and engage, for me as a teacher, it makes me want to do more research. Like before I start my class, I literally go back and do some research. I try to dig and see as much as I can pull out, to offer you guys, because I see that there is a desire to learn. And so I want to keep feeding you guys. I want to give you the information that you can walk away with, inshallah ta'ala, that will change your perspective on, text that you thought you understood. That's my job as a teacher.
One more thing. I noticed, especially with me, we make a lot of mistakes because we really don't know. And we think like what we know, we can just operate accordingly. But I think a lot of people are making mistakes, crucial mistakes.
With regard to what?
You said what?
With regard to what? Marriage?
Everything. Marriage, decision-making, because we don't necessarily go according to Quran and Sunnah. So if you only just read the Quran based off of, what you could understand from it, and hearing other prophets' stories, but if you don't teach yourself or go to classes and learn the details of how we're supposed to live on a daily, like, waking up, the du'as before you step foot in the bathroom, du'as when you travel or step foot outside the house. If people don't know about the intricacies, they can make a lot of mistakes or not do better.
Mm-hmm.
As a whole.
No, you're right. You're right. We have to be lifelong learners, always open to new information, new understanding, new interpretations, things that we thought that we understood. You might sit with someone and you might say, man, I've heard that hadith 1,000 times and I've never heard it broken down like that. That's my job. That's what I enjoy doing. Because as a convert to Islam, I came into Islam and I seen Muslims having this one-track mind when it comes to these texts from the Quran and the Sunnah. And as a person who had an opportunity to go overseas and study, acquire the Arabic language, each level allowed me access to a different door that the average Muslim doesn't have access to. Learning the Arabic language gives you access to a door that those who don't know the Arabic language gives you access to. Learning the Arabic language on different levels gives you access to doors that a person who knows the Arabic language doesn't have access to. Sitting with scholars, gives you access to a door that those who didn't sit with scholars don't have access to. Having an understanding of what scholars are actually saying gives you access to a door that even those who sat with scholars don't have access to. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you a brain, giving you understanding, giving you tawfiq, and opening doors for you to have a deeper understanding gives you access to knowledge that people who sat and listened and learned the same things but wasn't granted the tawfiq, they don't have access to. So it's just always trying to put yourself in a position to gain a deeper understanding, a better understanding of things that you thought you knew and you understood, you know. And you know what you guys are doing right now of, you know, learning, sitting in classes and trying to have a better understanding of these things. This is part of that process. And perhaps inshallah ta'ala, you can impart this information onto your children, impart this information onto, you know, you have sisters, halaqas and circles, you know, that you have access to that I may not have access to, and you can impart that information onto them, alhamdulillah. And as Imam Ahmed said, pay zakat on your knowledge by teaching it to others. Everything has zakat. You have to pay zakat on pretty much everything. You pay zakat on your life by praising Allah and thanking Allah and being grateful to Allah for giving you the life that you have. That's how you pay zakat on the life that you have. You pay zakat on your knowledge by teaching it to others and not hoarding it, not, you know, keeping it for yourself, teaching it to others. That's how you pay zakat. So everything has zakat. Temporary marriage, you're talking about nikah and mut'ah nikah, which is haram. It's haram to do a temporary marriage. This is haram in Islam, and it will be haram until Yawm al-Qiyamah. The only people that practice this are ignorant Muslims and Shia, the deviant group that has gone far and far away from the straight path. But people who understand the traditions of the Prophet ﷺ know that mut'ah marriage, temporary marriage, is haram, as well as marriage with the intention of divorce is also haram, which is something that used to be a phenomenon in the Salafi community years ago. Could you reference the verse in the Quran you mentioned? You said those who observe the code, the honor is a sign of piety. Yes, that ayat. That ayat is actually the title for our winter conference. Our winter conference will be centered around that. Maintaining our values. That ayat is Surah Hajj, Surah 22, ayat 32. Surah 22, ayat 32. ذَلِكَ وَمَن يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Those who honor the symbols, the symbols meaning the codes that Allah has given us in our deen, that those who honor them, it is from the piety that is in their hearts, the taqwa that is in their hearts. You honor the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers sacred. Anything that Islam says is sacred, anything that Islam says should be held to a high standard, you honor that, that is from the taqwa that is in your heart. طيب إن شاء الله تعالى we'll stop here. جزاكم الله خيرا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا وسبحانك ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Walaikum assalam.
Walaikum assalam.
Walaikum salam.